What's up, Sega gamers? Dan, the Mega Driver here of the Sega Guys for another very special The Sega Guys Fight!
Out the road. Virtua Fighter, the beat-em-up that birthed a genre and changed the course of the gaming industry. Once the jewel in Sega's arcade crown, each game in the series bettered the last. From the iconic flat-shaded Model 1 polygons of Virtua Fighter to the texture-mapped Model 2 behemoth that was Virtua Fighter 2, the cartoonish fisticuffs of days gone were replaced with fluid, motion-captured movement as not only the fighting genre but the entire industry was redefined by Yu Suzuki's masterpiece. From the series' debut in Japanese arcades in 1993 to its last numbered sequel in 2006, yes, 17 years ago, each entry has raised the bar in physics, movement and graphical fidelity. In fact, Virtua Fighter is a phenomenon to which near every corner of the hobby owes a debt of gratitude, from Quake to Tomb Raider to the very existence of the PlayStation itself as we know it. And while gamers today dine out on Tekken and Street Fighter, hell, even Killer Instinct got its moment in the sun, it seems that Sega have done the once unthinkable and consigned Virtua Fighter to memory. Sure, we had PS4 exclusive Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown that added a new lick of visual paint, although whether it was an improvement is a matter of opinion. It wasn't that new entry in the series that fans craved. However, that's today, and a story for another video. For now, we're going back to 1996. On November 8th, 1996, at the Senryaku Happy Yokai Conference, Yu Suzuki confirmed that Virtua Fighter 3 would be coming to the Sega Saturn, claiming that AM2 and myself will take full responsibility for this translation. The confirmation by Suzuki-san made it as far as the UK Sega Saturn magazine, who joyfully reported the news, and no wonder. Details on the Saturn port remain relatively thin on the ground. Screenshots of the supposed Saturn version have been doing the rounds online for well over 15 years, with claims of two Saturn builds, one utilising an expansion peripheral and the other running on stock hardware. Some even claim the Saturn build was completed and is locked away, never to be seen. In the end, the Saturn port would never come. Yu Suzuki would shift his creative focus to a little game called Shenmue, and the task of porting Virtua Fighter 3 TB to Sega's next-gen system was handed to Genki, founded in October 1990 by Hiroshi Hamagaki and Tomo Kimura. Fun fact, Genki's logo is a picture of Hamagaki-san, drawn by his son when he was just 3 years old. How cool is that? I'm James, the Segaholic, one half of the Sega Guys, and in this edition of the Sega Guys Fight, I'm going to look at the Dreamcast port of Virtua Fighter 3 TB and ask if Genki deserved more credit. Virtua Fighter 3 TB released over a year after the original Virtua Fighter 3 and was the game expected to bring Model 3 into the home with the arrival of Sega's Dreamcast console. Throughout the console's development and with every report of specs and performance, Model 3 was a constant reference. However, eyebrows were raised when Genki and not AM2 were mentioned as those responsible for the Dreamcast port of Virtua Fighter 3 TB. A launch title in Japan, the game is a port of the Model 3 Step 1.0 version, the earliest iteration of Sega's then arcade superpower. While no concrete development information could be found, the general consensus is that Genki had just 4 to 6 months to make Virtua Fighter 3 TB a reality in time for the Japanese launch. In many ways, this echoes the development woes of Sega Rally 2, which featured on a previous episode of the Sega Guys Race. Sega Rally 2's below par port is often blamed on being developed alongside the hardware itself, and while Rally 2 didn't make the Japanese launch and was taken back for last minute tweaks, Virtua Fighter 3 TB was deemed good to go. In the remainder of the video, you'll see the Model 3 version running in comparison with the Dreamcast one. The Model 3 footage has been captured using the Super Model 3 emulator running on Windows 11, captured in OBS, where the Dreamcast feed is coming directly via HDMI hooked up to the console's VGA output, also captured on OBS. The major differences are clear to see when stacked side by side, with the Dreamcast version falling behind in terms of lighting and texture quality. The lighting is especially noticeable on Jeffrey's moonlit beach stage, while other issues such as polygon misalignment crop up on some character models, most noticeable on Shun-Di, where his leg meets his torso. Minor tweaks were made to the Western release, mainly improving shadows, but those changes alone weren't anywhere near enough to compete with Soul Calibur and Power Stone. The backgrounds themselves, while gorgeous, are lower in resolution than the arcade, with the 2D horizon backgrounds looking a little blurrier or pixelated. See the moon on Jeffrey stage or the green hills on Shun-Di stage. Likewise, textures on 3D elements of the stages are notably lower in resolution than their Model 3 equivalent. However, some stages, such as Lions, are incredible on Dreamcast. However, behind all these flaws, for lack of a better word, the soul of Virtua Fighter 3 TB shines through, because what Genki have managed to achieve is a port which feels every bit as good as its arcade brother. I used an Xbox One X controller to play the Super Model 3 version and the standard Dreamcast pad for the home port, and both felt pretty much exactly the same. The weight of the fighters, the speed of their moves, the responsiveness of the fighters, and the timing of the moves. Genki even included the motion blur when doing heavier moves, which again just adds to the feel of the game. It's a port which has been much maligned as the decades have passed, but Virtua Fighter 3 TB, like Virtua Fighter 1 on the Saturn, is an enjoyable arcade beat-em-up experience where Sega, or in this case Genki, does what Sega does best: bring an accurate gameplay representation of the arcade to the home. And the fact that the game plays the same as its arcade counterpart and looks around 80% as good as it, when you consider the rushed development, is testament to Genki and the work their team done on the port. Could the port have been better? Absolutely. Just look at the visual fidelity of Soul Calibur to see what Dreamcast is capable of, even if it was enhancing grossly inferior arcade tech to Model 3. To put things in context, a Model 3 board costs $20,000, where a Dreamcast was a $200 box under your TV. Genki delivered 80% of the arcade experience for 1% of its price. The moment I booted up Virtua Fighter 3 on my Japanese Dreamcast is one of the gaming memories that will live with me forever. It's part of my journey through this life in gaming, and it's a game which continues to have its own special place to this day, being the only mainline Virtua Fighter game which remains a Sega console exclusive. Virtua Fighter 1 went to PC with original and remix modes. Virtua Fighter 2 also graced the PC and is still available on the Xbox. Virtua Fighter 4 went to PS2, and Virtua Fighter 5 graced both Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 before the recent and aforementioned Ultimate Showdown came to PlayStation 4. Sure, Virtua Fighter 3 TB may lack the polish of Soul Calibur. No one can deny that Namco's Fighter is jam-packed full of extra content. And while Power Stone is rightly lauded for its wonderful visuals and chaotic arena-style gameplay, there's still an allure to Sega's title that many of us from that era resonate towards. Virtua Fighter 3 was the poster child for Model 3. From the very earliest tech demos, we were wowed as Sega Saturn magazine gave us a glimpse at the future of home console gaming. And while concessions were made, as alluded to earlier, this was still the game that made this then 18-year-old Sega Saturn owner need, not want, but need a Japanese Dreamcast to get this game at home as soon as possible. And having this game at home at the time is something you really had to experience to fully appreciate. Try looking at this Dreamcast footage and think what we had at home in late 1998, early 1999. Tekken 3 on PlayStation 1 is a fantastic port, but even its arcade big brother was out of date before it even launched, given that Model 3 Virtua Fighter 3 had hit the arcades before it. We went from the likes of Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Burning Rangers and Panzer Dragoon Saga to this. Eyes that looked their opponents up and down, clothes that swayed in the wind, intricate background details and fluid humanoid movement. If you want to check out Virtua Fighter 3 TB or even stock Virtua Fighter 3, check out the link to Warped Polygon's excellent Supermodel 3 setup guide in the description. But the Dreamcast version is still worthy of your time, just like Genki are more than worthy of our respect. If you've made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this comparison tinged with some history. If you enjoy what we do on the channel, please check out our other content, including game-specific shorts and of course the main podcast. You can catch me on Twitter, or X as it's now known, at the Segaholic. You can catch my sparring partner Dan at Swooper_D. You can find the pod account at Sega Guys. But until next time, stay Sega, stay retro, and we will see you on the Sega side. Sega!